by, Rem Koolhaas and Delirious New York, and Lorinda's, a pupil of his from Columbia. I guess one of my other favorite projects is Max's old house. I really enjoyed that project in Coconut Grove, really beautiful. And also in a Miami Vice movie as a villain's headquarters.
That should have been in your book on villains and layers.
I know. Michael Mann was in the book, but
okay.
yeah, and then so anyway, but that was two of my three, including Marlise's Bacardi building, which is down the block from Carl's. Yeah.
Very nice. Max, you want to follow with that?
Sure. I think instead of a single building, I have a collection of buildings, which is Stiltsville. They're just so humble and unique, and Miami, and just fascinating, So I think just being out there kind of on the flats of Biscayne Bay, surrounded by those little structures, is a really uniquely Miami experience. And
the inspiration for the art museum.
Yeah, so
everything is connected.
It all comes together.
Yeah. And Lourdes?
Well, mine's also we're all attracted to the ocean, obviously. Mine is actually all of the ones that Chad and Marilise and Max have said, but actually Vizcaya Museum and Gardens on the bay, because it is so much the history of the beginning, in a lot of ways, of Miami's lush and rich and opulent, while having to address living on the bay, which they really didn't understand because they were only coming in the winter. But it really captures, when it was not covered by air conditioning, everything that is wonderful about living in Florida in the winter. Of course, you've got the other 9 months to deal with. And the gardens and all the things that man always does to fight the environment, because this is a Renaissance garden in the middle of the subtropics of Miami, and yet it manages to survive. And then actually another good reason is because I had the pleasure and fortune of being hired to replace the old skylight with a new skylight. So it's kind of, a little self-serving that it is my favorite building, but it was already my favorite building. So, but definitely, I think all of them are tied. And it was a villain house too in Iron Man 3, Chad.
Yeah. Actually, and just to tie it all together, my wife would probably be upset I didn't mention it because I got married there.
See, we're all tied somehow.
Yeah.
It's a small world here in architecture.
It is a small world, yeah.
Just so everybody knows, please, if you have any questions for the fellows, you can either type it in the chat, or at the very end, we will be able to, everybody can turn on their cameras and we can have a chat. So the first question is open to all, but we'll start with Lourdes. How did you get your start in the architecture field, and is this where you thought you would be when you were younger? Also, really quickly, I know I'm sidetracking, but I want to congratulate you on becoming the president-elect for AIA Florida. So that's an awesome piece as well.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to using all of you to help me that year. You just don't know it yet, but I'm telling you right now. Well, actually, I knew since I was probably 10 that I wanted to be an architect. My grandfather is an architect. My uncle is an architect. With both passed away, but architects. And my grandfather was also an engineer, because back in his day in Cuba, you went an extra year from engineering and you became an architect. So my 3 siblings were engineers and I'm the youngest, and I said, well, I don't want to be what they are. I always want to be different. So, and I liked building and roadways and houses, and Legos was my favorite toy since I was a child. So I still actually have that box of Legos at home that my children are allowed to touch. And so it is where I thought I would be, not necessarily doing exactly this, because I didn't really know what an architecture business or practice was when I was 10, but certainly I don't regret it. I wouldn't know what else to do if I had to do this all over again.
Great, thank you, Lourdes. How about Max? What are you?
How
What's
did I
your
get my
story?
start? I think I was fortunate to be born and raised in a really interesting house. The late architect Gene Leedy designed the house that I grew up in, and it was this, assemblage of exposed concrete block, long spanning concrete beams, a lot of walls of glass. And I just think from a very early age, I saw things differently, you know what I mean? And throughout my whole life, I got exposed to just some really cool architecture from growing up in the town that Gene Leedy did, like 100 buildings. That exposure just kind of set me subconsciously, I think, on a track to pursue architecture.
Great, that's really cool. Definitely not a cookie cutter house then.
No.
How about Chad?
Yeah, I guess a slightly similar experience. My parents decided to build a house when I was about 8 years old, and I ended up spending time with the architect who was actually moonlighting. He worked in an office during the day, and then at night would work for builders designing custom homes. And I had the opportunity to sit around the table with yellow trace and basically like dream up anything we could possibly consider. And that was really my first foray into architecture. Once again, like Laura said, like I didn't really know what that meant as a business. I probably still don't know.
Yeah.
Learning every day, and it's been an interesting journey. But since that point, I was 8 years old. I from that point on was just drawing houses, and that was kind of my thing. And it's nice to 40 years later to be doing the same thing and having a lot of the same ideas. So.
Seems like you were all influenced very young. Marilise, is that the same for you?
Guilty, yes. So I'm the daughter of an architect, and I grew up in an architect's family and house. My dad was studied and practiced in Cuba. He had a wonderful firm that did all kinds of really gorgeous buildings, and that practice ended with the revolution. My family moved to a number of countries and a number of cities before we landed in Miami. But you get a perspective of what the life of an architect is from living with one, not the business end, right? I think that Lourdes and Chad are right. That's a whole different gig. But you understand something about the ethos of building, of living with that interest in a designed world. I should say that I've always been really interested in telling stories. When I went to school, I didn't go to architecture school right away, even though it was something that I thought I would eventually do. My degree's in English Lit, my first one. And so the storytelling, when I decided to go to architecture, was something that I thought buildings could do. And that's really been the tack that I have taken to thinking about architecture and the academy, which is where I've ended up. I own a small practice, nothing at the scale of any of my colleagues here on the panel. I do tiny projects when I think they're really interesting. But by and large, the whole business of talking to students and telling them about what's wonderful about architecture is something that I've been doing for many years and that I love very much.
Great, thank you. Okay, so a similar question. So what has been one of the hardest challenges you've had to face as an architect, and how did you overcome it? And we'll start with Chad.
Of course, give me the tough questions. I would say becoming an architect, I don't know if it was yes, it's time consuming, and but I've been theoretically like preparing for it since I was 8 years old. I had the opportunity to go to a local community college when I was like a sophomore in high school, I started taking architecture classes in a community college and ended up with a really amazing professor who studied and worked under Peter Eisman and Gwathmey Siegel. And, he was kind of like a rare jewel in suburban New Jersey. So I ended up working in his firm very early on in high school. So, I think one of the hardest things is getting into a good architecture college, preparing your portfolio, and kind of like that entire process. I think what's so critical is to really have a passion for what you do and take every measure you can to, follow your dreams. So for me, I went to like a architecture career show, I guess, when in New York in the city, and I saw Cornell had this kind of dragon there, and Richard Meyer, when it was safe to talk about Richard Meyer, had gone there, and all these interesting people were kind of from. So then I ended up going to a summer program at Cornell, and then to Cornell, and lived and worked around the world, over many countries. And then, ended up in Miami and worked at Architectonica for 5 years, and, unknowingly kind of went out on my own. And, it's been a interesting ride since. I think like the hardest part in running a firm is obviously getting work. But, I think it's kind of balancing the amount of work with the amount of staff. It's never the perfect balance. It's either too little work and too much staff, or too much work and too little staff. And, I think that's always, besides like getting paid by clients in a timely manner, it's really like juggling workflow with, overhead and operational, realities.
Great, thank you, Chad. Lourdes, do you have any challenges you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, a little bit, as Chad says, the understanding of what it is to be an architect is more than just you design the building and all, thought of all of its components, but the practice of architecture. That to me, I'm still learning it. I still, I was already a nerd. I'm an even bigger nerd now because I'm constantly on some webinar through Zoom learning something new about the practice of architecture, so that, as Chad says, you keep the flow of people and projects moving so that that whole machine can be fed comfortably, and we can all be enjoying what we're doing it. And so that challenge of understanding what that is, and still not forgetting the love of design, the love of elements, the love of why you became an architect in the first place, because you're getting caught in the business side of it. So I still find that challenging for me. But then when you do something like this, that you start to talk about what your favorite building is, and somebody mentions that building you hadn't thought of, and you got, oh my God, that's really why I still like it, because I could walk into a restroom, for crying out loud, and go, that's a cool looking tile. And my staff would laugh at me because I had to send them pictures. Look at this. This looks really good when we do those simple renovations of schools. Those little things still excite me, even when it's not, some, $300 million project. It's sometimes the little stuff, that detail that you thought, wow, that's a really great solution. And keeping that love is what the challenge is. So you don't get caught in minutia, and remember that design is what matters. Look cool looking pencil and whatever.
Yeah, this profession is definitely passion is key. Max or Marilise, anything on challenges you've had to face?
I think I still have an ongoing challenge of just learning to say no.
Oh, I haven't learned that one.
And yeah, it's across the board, but not every client's going to be a good fit for you. And sometimes you're better off if you sense there's something weird or wrong, not necessarily about the project, but about the client or the demands. It's probably better to cut it at the beginning. A because once you start a project with somebody, you're wedded to them for, quite some time. So I think that it's taken me a long time to really feel like I've, asking the right questions of the clients to figure out their expectations are in line with what our deliverables are going to be. And if it's not going to be a good fit, you're probably better off passing. So that's taken a long time, because I would just say yes to anything.
That's a great point, Max.
Send the passes our way, Max. Send the passes.
All right.
I'll
Figure it out, share.
Okay.
No, I would say among challenges, I'm a perfectionist, as I'm sure everyone is on this panel, and probably everyone who dialed into this Zoom. So for me, one of the big challenges is managing my own expectations of myself. Because if you don't, it has repercussions for everything. So that's a big one. And the second one, maybe not so much a challenge as in something difficult, but something that's been a pleasure, is expanding my definition of what architecture is, and what the education that you get in architecture school really prepares you to do. And when you start, you have no idea. There really is so much. So we'll leave it there.
Great. And since we're really talking about, the business aspect, first question would be, I guess for really Chad and Max, was what made you start your own practice? We'll start with Max this time.
I just had kind of this longing to chart my own course. I had worked in some larger firms. I had worked actually, I was working with shop architects in New York City when I decided I was their first employee. And I knew I wanted to get back to Florida, and I wanted a big city. So Miami checked both of those boxes for me. It was a big decision to just kind of hang it all out on the line and say, I'm going to start my own practice. So it's just something that I think probably just that exposure to my mentors early in life, again, subconsciously set me on that track.
Great. And Chad, how about yourself?
I guess a momentary lapse of sanity.
Sanity. I knew you were going to say the word sanity.
I guess, similar to the Max, I'd been working since high school in architecture offices, and then had the pleasure, every summer to work in different countries around the world, from Spain to Israel to Japan to, living in Rome and working around, even to building a house for one of my professors in New Mexico, an earthship. And then, interestingly enough, I was supposed to go to London. This was in '94. And, when I graduated, it was a really bad recession. So I can kind of sympathize with what's happening now. And I ended up flying to London. And for whatever reason, the hand of God or not, I did not get allowed in. I had a job with KPF in London that one of my professors had, helped organize. And then from there, I was going to go on to work for Rem Koolhaas in Rotterdam, who is actually going through bankruptcy restructuring. So, a lot of my heroes of architecture, they all had many bankruptcies, from Jean Nouvel to Rem Koolhaas to, I even hear like Stephen Hall, and so it was always one of these things that to kind of enter with caution. I ended up starting work at Architectonica in '95, drove down from New Jersey with my father, and never came back to New Jersey. But I left there after, I actually just took a leave of absence. I didn't even think to start a firm. Maybe I was just thinking a little bit about how it worked with someone in the architect that my parents work with. But I ended up getting two very, very small jobs that allowed me to kind of substitute my very nominal salary with working, instead of 100 hours a week, maybe, 15 or 20 hours a week. And it allowed me to study for my exams. So, I wasn't, I don't know if I was burned out, but I was like, working really hard, running a lot of great design adventures with Lorinda and Bernardo, and traveling all around the world on their behalf at a very young age. And I never really thought to like start my own firm. I actually thought I might go back to graduate school, and then, work in Europe somewhere, as I was intended to. But I just kind of like passively took a leave of absence and then never came back. And as I was running out of money, because both those, I should have had an early wisdom, both those projects stopped very shortly after I got them, and had a limited amount of money to basically finish my exams before I had to go back to work. And I just ended up, basically starting putting together projects, with investors, and doing our own development to do essentially the architecture. So it was all very organic. I wish I had like some really amazing plan, but it was very, very organic, and just kind of a natural progression through things. So I think it's always interesting to understand, to kind of capture opportunities when they present themselves, right? And kind of run with those opportunities, I think is kind of really important. And every day I'm questioning if it was the right move or not. Sometimes it seems like it was, other times, not too sure. But I think to Max's point, really just being able to do things the way that you would like them to be done. In my case, it was really spending, a bit more time and focus and this kind of relentless pursuit of something, maybe less than more in terms of quantity of projects. So, for me, it was really just trying to be able to express my own sensibilities in the way that I thought were the most true to form.
Right, and as designers, we all hope to, express our thoughts through design. So this is a question in the chat. Is in school, they never teach you the part of business architecture firms need. How can we learn or grow in the business part of architecture to be able to open our own firm? So I guess learning the ropes that you all had to do as your own firm, it's your own practice. So we'll start with Lourdes.
That is something I'm still learning myself, I have to admit. I think one of the keys is that nowadays, I think students really are taught a little bit better that idea that architecture is more than just design, but it is a business. In my day, it was the dirty word, you just didn't say that word. So I'm sure some of us had to learn business by, baptism by fire, sink or swim. So for the newer generation, I encourage you to really ask the questions. Don't get so involved in just designing whatever they tasked you, but start asking the questions. Well, how big is our fee? How many hours am I supposed to work on it? How much are the engineers supposed to get involved? So you start to see that sort of that overall picture. Okay, you're giving me this much money, that means I got this much time to do it. And so then once you start to understand, you start to see, well, okay, so how does that break down? And then how do and much as we all hate numbers maybe, or we love them depending on your perspective, maybe a little accounting class would not be bad for everybody to take. So you start to understand what the words mean. I had no idea what the term profit and loss meant until I was much older than I should have been to know what that term is. So I really would encourage, every young professional out there and students, find an accounting or a business class that even if you think you're not going to need it or it's boring as hell, take it so you can learn the basic, at least terminology. so that when it's time for you to say, I'm going to really open a business, now I know what do you mean by a business plan is. I'm not sure I know what the hell that means personally. A strategic, so you can start to at least have some semblance of enough that either you decide to plunge into it, or you simply say, you know what, I actually like staying at this position and not necessarily take that responsibility. Because it happens a lot. I'm going to open my office because that's the dream. We're all taught that we have to open our office. But they don't tell you all of the things that come with it. That it's, if you've got staff, you're responsible for them, and all these other things that can be very mind-blowing. I spent a lot of my time doing administrative work that it just drives me nuts at times. And dealing with people and those kind of things. And so if we learned a little bit of that early enough, you can decide, do I really want to open my own office? I'm not saying that I'm not happy owning my own office, but not everybody can be the same thing. Not everybody will want that. They might be happier being at a different level at a larger firm and those kind of things. That solo architect, that fountainhead concept, it's not for everybody. And so the sooner we learn what business means, I think the better we are at making those decisions.
Great points, Lourdes. Thank you. And
you'll take an accounting class soon, right?
I actually minored in business administration, so
good for you.
Good for you.
But Marilise, do you have anything else to add on what students or emerging professionals should do to prepare for that aspect of the business?
No, it's a great question, and I think Lourdes hit a lot of the basic points. I think knowing more is critical. I would say that one of the interesting things that's happened in recent years, certainly everywhere in the world, but also in universities and the academy, is a real interest in entrepreneurship and the role that architects can play in sort of focusing entrepreneurial spirit and ideas and making them a part of what they do. And I think that it gives you a mindset that is both kicking in the creative part of what we do and also the sort of practical part of what we are taught to do. And I think that that's a kind of perfect combination and training. There's no doubt that you have professional practice classes. Often it's the last class you take just before you graduate, and you wish you had known all of that stuff in a more thoroughgoing way earlier on, so that it isn't just all design and then all of a sudden the real world kicks in. Part of what we're doing at FIU, where I teach, is trying to integrate issues of practice and, again, sort of practicality more throughout the curriculum, so that it isn't just a one-shot deal at the end. But I think, getting a double major or a minor in business is a great idea. You should do some in law too, also super important. These are all sort of critical basic knowledge.
Thank you. Chad and Max, do you have anything else to add, or think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said. I could just think about my own experience. I ended up doing an independent study on professional practice and missed a course at Cornell for, I don't know why, but I ended up doing this independent study. So maybe I don't know what they did teach, but I'm one of the few people in my class who have their own office. So maybe I missed the part about don't do it. But, I would say that a lot of architects that I knew, or some architects that I knew, it would always try to steer me out of being an architect. I took business classes at Cornell. I took real estate classes at the hospital. I took business classes in the graduate school about entrepreneurship and enterprise. I took real estate classes in the hotel school to learn about development. I think all those were helpful, but none of it prepared me for the stuff that you have to deal with on a given day running and operating an office. I mean, it kind of boggles my mind about how much stuff you have to deal with, as you were saying, like business and legal and human resources, and and then finding the time to do the parts of the, of the practice of being an art that you really love, right? I mean, that's kind of like why we do what we do, is to like get into the design and the thinking and the, execution of work. So, it is very, very tricky. I definitely think it helps to understand all those things, but at the same time, I think it would kind of like bum you out if you knew too much too early, because it would probably scare you. And I do think there's something really beautiful and pure about the architectural education that you don't want to like corrupt the mind and thinking about liability and what have you. So it's a delicate balance, and honestly, I don't have the answer. As Lourdes said, I'm learning every day. Max is learning to say no. Like I haven't learned to say no yet. I still am optimistic I'll be able to make everything work out, but but it is a very delicate dance, and in some ways, the practice of architecture as I like to pursue it, and I'm sure the others, is in some ways like contradictory to good business, good business, right? Like, or a business plan, right? Like
right.
I mean, the way that we approach things is like, never use what you've done before, reinvent the wheel every time, take whatever time and energy it takes, use that to do, the best thing that you can do, regardless of, how much it costs. It's fundamentally, at odds with good business per se. It's not to say that you can't have a good business, and we've, in many years I've had great businesses. This year is a little early to tell, but, knock on wood, it's been better than we ever expected, given the situation. But it really is a very delicate dance that I don't have the answer to yet. And hopefully by the time I, leave this planet, I might have some wisdom. But, I just think about all of my favorite architects and the bankruptcies of like Frank Lloyd Wright and Reb Koolhaas and all the, and it's like, I understand why, it's like, it's not a mystery. And I guess I've tried my best to kind of operate at that spectrum of, intense creativity and risk, but at the same time, trying to be fiscally responsible with our own resources as well as our clients. And I think, it's definitely a lot to juggle. So maybe join the circus or go to circus school to figure out juggling more than anything.
That'd be a good one.
Yeah, Max.
Actually, recently learned how to juggle, so I'm excited about that. I think of course, have a circus camp with my kids.
I think just two pieces of advice if you're young and want to know more about the business side. If you can arrange, an internship / mentorship with a smaller office where you're kind of exposed to everything. Mm-hmm. You can chime in on the phone calls about, architects speaking with their attorneys or talking about payroll or blah, 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 all that stuff. Just be a sponge and just absorb all that stuff. And second, I think just one of the small for dummies books, right? Opening a small business for dummies. When I first started, I didn't know that employers had to pay payroll tax and this kind of very basic stuff, so you should just learn as much of all the broad stuff as you can, but, don't be overwhelmed by it. Always keep drawing, keep designing, and you'll find that way to juggle it out without dropping the ball.
That's the most important part, right? Well, thank you. Okay, so our next question is, a lot of young professionals haven't gone through a large event during their career, such as an economic recession. With the pandemic this year, things have changed more than ever. what advice would you give aspiring architects today, most likely just graduated from college, to ensure a successful career in architecture? Mary-Lise, we can start with you since you're on the educational side.
Okay. So advice, first of all, perseverance, right? With perseverance and resilience, things will change over time. You got to hang in there. Think of this as an opportunity to gain additional credentials of a whole broad range, whether it is going back to school to study business and law and juggling and everything else that you think you might need in order to be a sort of more effective architect when you finish, or going back to focus on research, which is increasingly at the heart of practice, and finding ways to be part of conversations about what's going on in the world and how architects can contribute to that. So there are post-professional degrees, there are multiple degrees that you can get. If you're an architect, it's really a short additional step to perhaps become a landscape architect or an interior architecture specialist, or even to get our new degree at FIU, which is the Doctorate of Design. I would also say another piece of advice is to remember that the skill set that comes with your architectural education prepares you for all kinds of eventualities. We are creative problem solvers, we are thinkers, we are makers, we are outside the box creators. We are typically outstanding communicators, and we communicate both verbally and visually. And those are skills that will help you in almost anything that you do. It will help you to redefine what you yourself can do, and it will make many doors open for you.
Great, thank you, Mary-Lise. Lourdes, do you have any advice about this?
Yes, I definitely get licensed. That is one of my pet peeves. You've worked so hard to study and graduate and suffered and enjoyed at the same time, studio and all those all-nighters. You know, you become licensed, your opportunities open, whether it's now or in 10 years or whenever, so that you can open that office or you can buy into an office or whatever the case may be. Don't wait. And now the longer you wait, the harder it is to get licensed, because life gets in the way. Who wants to study when you'd rather be out enjoying yourself, taking some sun, reading a book, binge watching on some show? So don't wait, you know, just because you finish studying and you want to take a break. No, don't take a break, because you've got to have it of study. And the other thing is, of course, the lemonade that I've drank for many years, join the AIA, because it does provide you those tools for mentorship, to meet people like us or people like you or people, you know, variety. They offer classes, they offer ability to stay connected. And they offer an enormous amount of resources and contacts that will help you. You know, I'm sure all of us have had a door open because we happen to have met somebody at an event, and sure enough, that was an AIA event or things like that. So it is, you know, not just because I'm going to be president of the state of Florida in a couple of years, or that I was president in Miami 15 years ago, but I really and truly believe that the professional organization of whatever you choose to do, if you're an attorney, you should belong to the bar, those kind of things, really, really help you stay connected to why you chose to be an architect. Plus, it helps you stay engaged, it helps you learn, you know, I can call any of the Max and I have, hey, I mean, do you know this person? And you do that because I might have never met him otherwise. So, you know, it is something that, I'm not sure how else to say it, but don't think it's not worth the money you're going to spend. It is worth every dime. And you're a perfect example of that, Amanda. You have been active forever, and I can see you just grow and get even more involved because you garnered, you saw the benefit. And I can't stress that enough.
Yeah, thank you, Lourdes. And Max, what is a piece of advice for any graduating student during this time?
Know, I'll just recap what Lourdes just said. You know, get licensed, get engaged, and put yourself out there, right? I mean, that's how you make connections. That's how you at the end of the day, it's a lot of just people stuff, right? Networking and, you know, throwing yourself out there if you're not, and beyond the professional world too. Look at some nonprofits or other stuff to get engaged with, because the world is bigger than just the architecture bubble, right? And
Right.
your leads for new jobs are going to come from outside the architecture bubble. So throw yourself out there into the real world.
That's a great point. Yeah, networking is key for our profession. Chad, anything in addition?
Yeah, I mean, Marlies kind of spoke a lot about passion and perseverance. I think that is super critical. I also think the ability to pivot and adapt, and you know, maybe you have a target or a goal, and as Max said, you take another way to get there, right? It may not be the way you thought. I mean, I also graduated, and Max, you probably graduated around the same time during a very substantial recession in 1994, where everyone was going bankrupt. It was like no work, architects weren't hiring. And, you know, as I said, I got sidetracked and didn't get allowed in with the one job I did have, into London. And I just think like the world is so much smaller now. There are so many different things to do, whether it be, helping organizations or, or doing competitions and publishing your work, through social media or whatever it might be. I mean, you're able to kind of reach a lot more people today than,
Right.
when we graduated, and when, I was probably one of a couple thousand people had email addresses, just because Cornell had a very kind of active science department. But, I think that you really have to take this opportunity, right? I mean, it's also good practice, because not that necessarily a pandemic happens that often, seems like every 100 years or so, but more to the fact that, it is par for the course, right? You have to be able to absorb these things, act fast, redirect your energy, be adaptive, be creative, and, follow your passion, right? Like architecture is as Max, it's kind of a big umbrella, and there are many other things that you could do with the skills that you have, as well as many other, side professions that can be done, like renderings, and, even
Right.
like a company like Pixar, many of the people who work there are architects. Not to say you have to do like visual things, but, movie industries and other things. So I think it's follow your passion, see what you're really interested in, and, engage, but definitely be prepared. It seems like every 7 to 10 years, like there is some sort of, thing that hits you like a stick behind or 2x4 behind your head. So it's not bad to kind of open up with that, that experience of seeing what's going to happen, because just like there are great times, that happen, and there are challenging times, and you just have to be able to have the stomach to kind of deal with these things, and the ability to move beyond, very challenging conditions. I think it's kind of good practice, to kind of see how to kind of move beyond a very complex time.
Right. It's kind of a similar version of the circle of life for economics, I guess. So a question from the chat. What does it mean to be a fellow in architecture? And what should an architecture student like me look forward to? I guess how to get to that point. I'll open it up to Lourdes, since you are the fellow committee chair.
I knew you were going to say that. I'm no longer that. So, the fellow in architecture is the way for AIA to honor or highlight members of the profession who have excelled or gone beyond just the basic's not the right word, but who have really excelled in their particular passion. So for example, Chad, I believe yours is in design, and so is yours, Max. So their passion, like all of ours, is design, but they have managed to get a lot of awards and really have gotten that. And so this is the fellowship from the AIA is really just really highlights that to really show that it's an honor. It's really an honor that the organization gives. But once you become a fellow, the key really is the giving back, the mentoring back to that younger generation to make sure that they have that passion. And you start from day one. I mean, you don't know when you graduate from college or those first 5 years after you work, whether you will or will not be a fellow, because your passion or your focus may be something slightly different. But you know, everything and anything you do leads you to that point. So it's not, you know, that I'm saying, oh, tomorrow I'm going to be a fellow and I need to do the checkbox. You know, it's just sort of happens because you put yourself out there, as Max said. You really went out there, and all of a sudden you realize, oh, well, you know, I have done quite a lot of things. Oh, okay, you know, let's give it a shot. You know, what else can they say? No, right? You know.
Right. It's similar to that comment of being engaged in your community and really helping forth the industry, whether it's design or community outreach or education. And I believe Mary-Lise, yours would be under education, correct?
It is, yes. Yes. There's actually a lot of different categories, service, design, I forget exactly. Lourdes will know them. This is dinner bailiwick. But yes, I did mine in education.
But
again,
even in the world, even in the design category, right? I mean, it could be in acoustical design or material design or neighborhood design. I mean, it's if you love what you do and you keep doing it, you know, it's just kind of the path to fellowship kind of unfolds for itself.
That passion and momentum. Okay, so on another question from the chat. So on the flip side, from the business end, do you have any advice on how to preserve a passion for the innovation design when you're working in the practical day-to-day side of architecture? And I think this would entail, you know, more of the details and the grunt work. We'll open that up for Max first.
Okay. Well, I interpreted that more as, you know, how do you keep the creative stuff going with all these other real world concerns? And, you know, you got to prioritize it. It's kind of like, you know, going to the gym or staying healthy. You know, you need to, you know, calendar yourself out and build those things in, you know, as just as important as a new client meeting or walking the dog or whatever, you know. I mean, you need to you need to build that into your schedule, or else all those other more mundane things will kind of crowd them out. I mean, for me, I would love to be able just to sit down in the office on one day and work on one project. You know, that would be such a relief and a headspace thing for me. But the reality is, probably working on I don't know how many different things overlapping at the same time, but I have started recently to really block out, you know, a 2-hour or 3-hour stretch, which is just the fun stuff. You know what I mean? Just the design
That's
stuff.
great.
And that seems to be working. So in summary, just prioritize it.
Great. And Chad, what are your thoughts? Keeping the creative juices flowing.
I guess just ignoring all the other stuff and hope it works out.
No, that doesn't work.
That doesn't work.
It depends. It depends. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, you know, it's also like your team, right? And who the people are in your team who can help you focus on the things that you do best. You know, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to really, you know, even though I unfortunately have to focus on many of the other things, you know, I don't have to really deal with the day-to-day of the other things. But, you know, as Max said, like trying to carve out time, you know, it's interesting in the pandemic times that we're living, you know, like travel to me has always been exciting, but a tremendous, you know, draw on my time. And I'm pretty good about travel because immediately I hop on a plane, I'm like asleep, and it's like the most restful time that I could possibly have. But, you know, just in March alone, you know, I was supposed to be 3 different times in Saudi Arabia, separate time in Jordan, another time in Europe, and another time in Colorado. And I was like, actually, it was like the one time I was like, and unfortunately, like some of these were like 15-minute meetings that were not consecutive in Saudi Arabia. So I'd have to go like one day for a 15-minute meeting, and the next one was like a week later. And then the next one was like a week later. So, you know, who wants to spend, or who can afford to spend that much time there,
Right.
you know, if you didn't have to. So I was actually at the one point where I couldn't even figure out how to do it all. And, you know, when the pandemic hit, I was like trying to convince organizations that I had to be there. I'm like, hey, I can't travel right now. You know, I can't be in Jordan to give a lecture for the hospitality thing that I was a keynote. And, you know, luckily these things got canceled, unfortunately, after I bought, you know, tens of thousands of dollars worth of tickets, but, you know, that I'm trying to get credit for. But, you know, I think that, you know, just being able to focus, it's been a positive side of this very challenging time to not have to, you know, run around the world, to be able to, even though we've been using Zoom and WebEx and GoToMeeting for, you know, 15 years or something, it's been a great tool. It's just now people kind of expect it. So even though it's nice to visit clients and nice to visit sites, it's also nice to be able to stay put. Unfortunately, you got to be careful what you ask for, because I've been spending 13-hour straight days on Zoom with the office, and, you know, that's been very exciting, and it's great that we have, you know, the work to do that, but it's also has its own challenges of, you know, of kind of being fixed in a particular place. And but it's been great creatively, you know, and the team has really pulled together. I see Max and Lourdes would appear to be offices. You know, we have a couple people working from the office, but everyone's been working from wherever they need to be for their safety. So, you know, it's been interesting to find more of the time to focus on design and less time dealing with some of the other complications.
That's a great point. And right now we definitely have a little more time to stay at home and draw or, you know, work on some of those design aspects. Lourdes, do you want to,
sure.
do you have anything else?
I would actually say that the design and the passion is that we're problem solvers. So if you ask me to now, you know, give you a report, you know, I'm going to look at the best way to analyze that report and present it and make it graphically, you know, pleasing so that it makes sense to me. So for me, all of the things that I do have some element of innovation and passion in it, so that I don't feel like just because I'm not drawing that new, you know, piece, you know, I'm not on AutoCAD or Revit or whatever, it's still part of what I do. It is still part of being a designer. And how do I communicate that? How do I communicate that to my staff, to the client? And, you know, Marilise said it, most of us are good communicators. So then it's, you know, that's how that passion for me continues, you know. Everything is a design option, you know.
Right, that's a great point, Lourdes. We are all designers at heart, and we can add that into anything we do.
Anything we do.
So we're going to have our 2 final questions. These will kind of be a speed round because we're a little over time. So what is one of the top traits a young professional should have in order to grow personally and professionally in the field of architecture?
Ask questions.
What?
Ask questions. Don't be shy to ask questions.
Marilise?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a great one. perseverance, curiosity, the willingness to work hard, and do what you love. I think, you do all of that, you're in good shape.
Great. Chad?
Exactly what Marilee said, but I would add, like, people speak a lot about grit. How, even at raising young kids right now, like this idea of like teaching grit. I think like grit comes from like being passionate. I think passion to me overrides everything. I think I'm naturally very lazy by nature, but my passion like makes me, work, 20-hour days and stuff like, so to me, it's like, it's finding the thing that you love to do, finding your unique voice as well, that and nurturing that, right? Like, don't follow, chart your own course. Of course, you could be inspired by people, and I'm inspired by all the fellows on the call today, but everyone has their own sort of special sauce and unique approach, and I think celebrate that and amplify the the uniqueness of your own voice.
Great. And Max?
Those are all hard answers to follow, right? The perseverance, the passion, the resiliency, the finding your voice, but then telling your story, right? I think that is the important part too. The uniqueness, the special sauce that Chad was talking about, it's more important, at least when you get more into trying to go after work or starting your own firm. People want to know about you, what makes you different, because there's a human connection to what we do. So don't be afraid to find a way to talk about your own story and why you got into what you do, and share the love with your clients.
Great. And okay, so this is the final question. If you could talk to your younger self, what would be one piece of advice you would give? And we'll start with Chad.
Buy Apple stock.
Okay, related to architecture. Clarify.
When after Steve Jobs left and Wozniak left, buy some Apple stock, and then you don't have to worry about all the more practical natures of running an office.
Max?
Was that his answer?
I think
that's
so.
his answer.
I mean, there's probably many other things, but I'll leave it at that because it's works. A speed round.
First thing that comes to your mind then. Max, you next?
Oh, me.
Yeah.
What I would tell my younger self is just, keep doing what you love, there's times when I do get frustrated, and I have been frustrated many times throughout the course of my career, and it doesn't last long, you know what I mean? And,
yeah.
I think my wife would say to put the Sharpie down and don't ever have it get in the washing machine again, but
all great points.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Lourdes?
I would say to not be afraid to take risks, that it's okay to not know the answer, but that you know more than you think you do. And if you don't, you'll figure out how to weigh it because you're a problem solver. You'll find a solution somewhere. You'll research it to death.
That's great. And to end, Marilise?
Oh man, I liked all the answers, from buying Apple stock to taking risks and finding your story and figuring out how to tell it. I want to just, I think obviously we need to follow our passions, but not necessarily just about our professions. And I just want to take 2 seconds to talk about the agency and the power of architecture and the power that you can have as an advocate in this profession, right? We are in many ways working on, we're making beautiful things, no question about it, but we have an opportunity to work on some of the most critical issues of our day. We redefine the role and the agency of the profession. We have a way to impact public health, and climate change and social justice and income inequality and all of the big things that are capturing the interest of the world. There is an architecture lens for all of that. And I would say to my younger self and to any student and any colleague now, to look at the ways in which our discipline and our skill set give you an opportunity to address all of those. I think it's something to cherish.
Thank you, and that's a wonderful way to end the program. I want to thank all four of you for speaking to all of us younger emerging professionals. We really appreciate your time. I want to also thank Sarah, Masha, and Jamie for being on the YAF committee and helping us put this on together. And I want to thank everybody for joining and participating with putting in questions. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing you in our next event. Colleen, is there anything else?
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you for inviting us.
No,
Really
thank you,
appreciate it.
everybody.
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a good
Bye.
night.
You too.